Welcome everyone to the Department of Justice's webinar on Guide to the Online Tool for Grant Writing. My name is Christina and I will be your moderator for today. It is my pleasure to turn things over to our subject matter expert from the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance. Your presenter today will be Julius Dupree.
Thank you, Christina. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Justice, I'd like to thank you all for joining on today's webinar. Actually, the purpose of this particular webinar is to walk you through our online grant writing tool. Basically, what it is it's a tool that's designed to provide you with guidance as you apply for the Coordinated Travel Assistance Solicitation, and also the same principles and the same structure can also be applicable to grants, non-CTAS grants as well. I just wanted to let you all know that this tool is free to access and is available as soon as you go to our website, and I'll show you that in a minute. But what our concern is that this is a tool that's available and it's very helpful, but it's just underutilized. So hopefully some of the guidance today, you'll find some time to at least be able to explore the tool and then see if it can be at all beneficial to you. I will say that we do CTAS assessments each year. Basically, we send out a questionnaire to all the tribes that have applied for CTAS. We ask them questions about what type of training and technical assistance tools that they may have utilized or that they may have found beneficial. And actually, this particular tool was actually cited as one of the tools that has been beneficial to folks that have applied for this program. The current CTAS application is out on the street. The due date for that solicitation is February 26th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so all the applications materials can be found on the Tribal Justice and Safety website, which is the link that's provided here on the website. That link includes the solicitation itself as well as the resource guide. It also includes any sample applications that may be available as well. And you can also find sample forms and that sort of thing on that page as well. So that's more of a one-stop shop to get all the resources that you need actually to be able to apply for the CTAS solicitation. And just so you know that there is a calendar of training webinars. It has been sent out via our listserv, and it's also posted on the Tribal Justice and Safety website, but you would have to go to the webinars link to be able to access that. Real quickly, just so you can kind of get an idea of the numbers as far as like what we funded or how many applications that we funded since 2015. You know, as you can see, there has been a trend where 2015 we saw actually the highest number. Then 2016 it was down to 215. Then 2017 is 225, and then 2018 it's down to 197 applicants. And so, you know, we're really trying to make an effort to improve our marketing for this particular solicitation. We really want to kind of figure out why the numbers are going down, and you know that there could be a myriad of reasons for that, and you know that I really can't explain at this point. But that is just something that we're looking at. But you can see that the level of funding for each year has been fairly consistent. 2015, our total amount available has been like 98.7 million, and then it was about 102 million in 2016, 101 million in 2017, and then actually 113 million in FY18. So we did see some increases in funding, which is encouraging. But this is really to give you an idea of how competitive the process is. I mean, as you can see, you know, we get a lot of applications, I should say. When I say applications, it's one tribe can apply for multiple purpose areas. And so when I talk about total applications, I mean basically purpose areas. So if you look at 2015, we had 627 applications. So that was really the number of applications that we received for all the purpose areas. As you can see, a lot of times the numbers are where, you know, we get a lot of applications, but we're only able to fund a fraction of them. And so that's why it's really important that, you know, when you are putting together your application, you're putting your best foot forward. You know, you're making sure that your application is responsive to all the requirements all the questions that are asked. Just because when we have peer reviewers review this information, they a lot of times they may not know about your specific jurisdiction. So it's really important for you to be able to kind of give that reviewer a good comprehensive picture of your particular needs, your jurisdiction, and any other information that may be appropriate for a reviewer to know as they're considering your applications for funding. Okay, so the online tool, it actually gives you some of the tools that you would need to pull together a fundable application. It asks you to read and talks about reading and comprehending complex grant solicitation, talks about how you need to go about coordinating a team to do a lot of the necessary work that's required to submit a grant application. And it also gives you guidance on, how to do an assessment, if you will, of your community needs so that you're ensuring that you're maximizing this grant opportunity, trying to ensure that you're meeting your community justice needs to the best of your ability. Now, the thing about this is that there may be a lot of needs that you may have in your community, but you want to make sure you prioritize those needs. That way you can make sure that you have the capacity to basically pull together the most robust application that you can, given the resources that you have available, your time commitment, and all those things. So when you go to this tool, basically you go right to our home page for grant. It's the Travel Justice and Safety web page, and I gave you the link to that earlier. You go right to the grant/CTAS link, and then when you do that, it actually is going to take you to, you'll scroll down to the bottom of the page, and then you'll see this online guide, actually. It'll be, an icon, you can't miss it. It'll have a little icon there, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a guidance on, it kind of summarizes, if you will, what the tool is and what the tool is designed to do. And then you would click on the Explore the Tool link, which is at the bottom of the page. When you go to the guide, you're going to get this particular welcome page. That's really a good place to start. And again, it just kind of summarizes why the guide was created and what the guide is designed to help you do. And then you'll see there's a next arrow, if you will. So when you would click to the next section. And so you would click that arrow, and then once you click the arrow, it gives you the option of selecting, basically going through step by step of what what you need to do to submit the application. And so there's a link there. It's called, you'll see it. It says application steps, and then right below it it's a home button. And so the tool is versatile, so that you can really work on any section of the tool at any one time. But you can always go back to the home page if you want to choose another section to work on. So it is user friendly in that way. But if you click on the application steps link, let's see, it's going to take you to step one of what you'll need to do in pulling together your application. The big thing that we want to push is that you got to make sure you review that solicitation thoroughly. Make sure you find out what all the requirements are, just so you know if your tribe is eligible for the certain purpose areas within the solicitation. There may be some requirements there that you'll have to check with other folks within your tribe to really figure out whether or not you can meet some of that eligibility criteria, those requirements. But it's important to go through thoroughly, review the whole solicitation from front to back, just to be able to make sure that you are that this particular funding opportunity is going to meet your needs. Okay, step two. So you're going to get to step two of the guide, and it's going to walk you through basically kind of emphasizing the importance of having a one-point person or a team leader, if you will, to lead the application process. Because if let's say you're applying for something for law enforcement, then you may be looking at applying for domestic violence. Then you also may be looking at applying for a purpose area related to substance abuse. So you got all these different pieces that you may be applying for, but if you don't have like one person that's really going to kind of be the lead and you know, making sure that everything gets done, you know, making sure that there's a timeline, you know, someone who's able to reach out to, you know, let's say you're working with the police chief, you want to reach out to the police chief and say, hey, did you get this piece of the application done yet? You know, we need to have this part done by this time. There's going to be an issue. If there's one person that's coordinating this, then it'll really kind of take the load off. Like if you have one person, let's say that's a coordinator, and then, you know, you're also working on writing the application, that's going to be tough for you to write the application and be the coordinator. To identify one person for that role, it'll take a lot of weight off of you on that as far as that's concerned. Identify team members that are going to, you know, that you're going to be working with on the application. And actually, I already kind of alluded to that a little bit, but when you really look at the technical aspects of the application, if you have the resources to have a grant writer, that's great. You want to make sure you have someone who has strong skills, but our solicitations are designed so that, you know, the layperson or someone who's not a grant writer can actually pick up the application and apply. You know, we don't want to make our application so difficult that you need someone who's a grant writer to be able to do this work. You also want to make sure you have a finance person to look to figure out who that is, because you're going to have to create a budget for the application, and that particular person is, you know, should be familiar with the Department of Justice financial guide to create a budget that includes allowable costs for the programs that you're applying for. Also, looking at staff and partners who will be involved in the potential project. So again, this is a comprehensive, kind of a coordinated type of solicitation. So, you know, you may want to go to the courts and find out from the court folks, what are you seeing that's a need, like in your court system. You may want to talk to law enforcement, corrections, you know, make sure you involve those folks. You know, you may have probation on board. You know, also you may have community service providers that provide treatment services to folks that have substance abuse problems. Bring those folks in. Also, you know, talk to members of the community, because a lot of the, you know, members of the community that may not be working within the justice system, but, you know, like for instance, there may be elders that have the insight and have wisdom about certain things that are going on in the community. So you want to make sure you have those folks involved, make sure the community is on board, make sure your leadership is on board. So these are things that you really want to focus on early on in the solicitation when you're actually pulling together the application, as opposed to after you've completed the application and submitted it. Step 4, as far as application steps, make sure that all the roles of the people involved in this project is clear. So again, if you have someone that's strong in grant writing, make sure that person's clear on his or her role as far as the grant writing process. Let's say you have other partners, like let's say you have a local or state or local partner that you're working with, you know, maybe they're going to be supportive because they're going to provide urinalysis testing or, you know, some other resource that they may have available that you can share, you know, with the county or the state. You know, have them involved, make sure they're clear. Like, do you want them to submit a letter of support? Because that's a good thing too. Like, if you can show that you are coordinating with other, you know, entities, those letters of support are helpful. But just make sure that you're clear what you want them to do as part of this process. Again, getting you to the finish line as far as the application is concerned is important. There's going to be 2 timelines, really. One timeline that you're going to submit as part of the application, which is going to show us, the reviewers, the DOJ components, that, you know, you have a timeline in place to be able to implement your proposed project. But there's also a timeline that you're going to want to do outside, you know, separately from that. That's going to get you to where you get your grant application written, you know, all the different pieces, all the different purpose areas for the grant completed, and then get your application submitted. Because the reason that timeline is important is because what we see sometimes is that folks actually, with the best intentions, but they'll get to where they're kind of under the gun, so to speak, where it's kind of last minute. And sometimes, you know, when you do that, you know, you run into technical problems. For us, we have clear guidance in the application as far as like what we'll accept if there's a late submission. But, you know, for the most part, it's really difficult to get a late application in if you're basically saying, well, we weren't able to submit because our server was down, or something like that. So get a timeline in place that will basically allow you to comfortably submit the solicitation without having to worry about whether or not you're going to encounter any technical issues at the when you try to get the application submitted. Another important application step is making sure your leadership is on board. Whatever purpose areas that you're applying for, make sure that your leadership knows that, or the chairperson or whatever the governing person is for your tribe, because what we're going to want as part of your application is an authorization, if you will. Again, at the very beginning, you should start this process with your tribal leadership, because I don't know how often, because each tribe is different as far as how often their board meets or their leadership meets. If you can kind of get on their calendar if you need to be able to give them an overview of this program and what purpose areas you're intending to go with, and that way you can get that tribal resolution, if you will, get that pulled together and be able to have that in time to submit for the application. So it's definitely important to get leadership on early. Again, so if I was to go through that section and then I clicked on the home button, it's going to take me back to this page, which is the getting started page. And so I can click on any one of these links. I can click on partner coordination. I can click on program design, vision and mission, budget. And so any one of these elements that I think I really want to hone in on, I'll have the option to do that. So I think that's great to have this flexibility built in this tool. So if I was to click on the vision statement, again, this is not something that we require in your application, but a lot of times having a vision statement will be helpful for your team, because that way you'll have a general sense, if you will, what you envision as far as the future is concerned, as far as what you all want to achieve for your community. And vision statements are going to be pretty broad. They're not going to be detailed, but again, it'll give you a clear direction for planning. And so as you go through this tool, you'll see there's going to be examples of vision statements that you can look at. It gives you where you got to select which is a good vision statement and which is not, what is not. So take a look at that. There's also a mission statement piece to that. So your mission statement is going to be more specific than your vision statement, and it'll be helpful in actually guiding the work that you do for the purpose areas. Because what will happen is, let's say you start writing the grant application, and you're applying for these different purpose areas. You want to revisit your vision and mission statements just to make sure that what you're proposing, or the things that you're applying for, fits within your vision and mission statement. So that could be a fluid process. Read critically. Again, the tool is going to give you a little more guidance on that. I think there's even a downloadable article on reading critically. But basically what it means to read critically is just to go through the application front to back, maybe do it, repeat that, maybe get someone else on your team to review it as well. Because what you want to do is you want to make sure you're clear on what's required for the application. You want to be clear on what the funders, that would be us, expect for this particular program or grant. You just want to, also make sure you're clear on what kind of impact that the funding might have on the tribe and what results that you're expecting. That's kind of what we're getting at as far as reading critically. I mean, there are certain requirements. There are travel requirements. You want to make sure you'll be able to meet those requirements. There also may be other things like, I know for our CTAS Purpose Area 4, there's certain requirements around, indicating what your level of involvement is with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, if they're providing staffing for your programs. We're going to want to know that. Be sure that you review all that information before you start writing the application. Again, reading critically, it's just like I was saying before, just reading the application over and over, and then also, basically take note. Make sure you're taking note of the weight of each of the sections, because what you'll notice is that there's a certain percentage of or weight, if you will, that's given to each section that you write in the solicitation. Like for your program narrative piece, there's a certain percentage for that. For the budget, there's a certain percentage time, for all those things. And so obviously the program design is the most weighted, if you will. So you want to make sure you're going to attribute, a proportionate amount of time based on the weight given to each of those sections. Really reading critically is I can't stress that enough. Another thing here that I want to talk quickly about is you can go. There's a map or there's like a mind mapping exercise that you can go through on the tool itself. Again, that's going to give you guidance on developing a vision statement, mission statement, partnerships, needs assessments, which I'll talk about in a little while, as well as developing your program design. Partner coordination, which is kind of what I alluded to. And the reason why I'm talking about it here, before you write your application, is the partners are really going to inform you on kind of what their needs are. Like if there's some trends that are out there that the police department is seeing as far as people that they're arresting, you're going to want to know that before you apply for the grant. I mean, and as far as the judge, the court system, are there certain people that the judge is seeing more often? Are they seeing a lot of people that are being arrested for DUIs? So, getting those partners, such as the courts, involved in the law enforcement and, any other, like I said, the community is going to be key as well. Let them know what you're doing, because those community members, have a lot of insight about what's going on. So definitely involve them in the process as well to the extent that you can. Really help, ultimately when you implement your program, if you've already briefed the community as far as what you're doing. I mean, if you have the time, it may be helpful to have a community meeting to kind of talk about what you all are intending to do and to get the input from the community early on. This next slide here talks about the importance of partnerships and developing relationships. I think that the one thing I do want to emphasize is, to the extent that you can work with partners outside of the tribe, that would be great. Like if you can broker partnerships with the local, the county or the state. I know some tribes are farther along in that than others, but what you'll find is that if you're working together to achieve a mutual goal, let's say you have folks that are incarcerated in the local jail facility, but then when they get out, they're going to be coming back to the reservation. Well, it'll be a good idea to have some sort of partnership with that local probation department, so that there's an understanding as far as how that community supervision is going to work as folks return back into the community. Same goes with the state as well. If you're doing a reentry program, obviously all the folks that are coming back to your community are not coming back just from a tribal facility. They may be coming back from the Bureau of Prisons. They may be coming back from the State Department of Corrections. And so, to the extent that you can be working with state, local, and even federal partners, that's helpful. But, I'm just saying, push the envelope on this, because the more you can, get that community that buy-in from other stakeholders that share common goals and have a common interest, then that'll go a long way in developing a solicitation as well. Levels of partnership. And so when you go through this exercise, it'll really kind of give you an idea. Like, there's going to be different levels of partnering. I mean, you're going to have some partners that are going to be more involved than others. Some of them may be short-term relationships or longer-term relationships. And so this tool will kind of give you some examples of these kind of partnerships. But, so there's going to be a certain level of intensity and commitment depending on what you want the partners to do. So just be clear with the partners as far as what their level of commitment should be. If it's about data collection and data sharing, be clear with them. That's what you really want them to step up on and really help you out with. As far as partner coordination, so it'll really help to do this community asset mapping. Because what you may not know on your own, like what assets are available to the community to leverage to help with your programming needs. So, tapping into these partnerships can give you some perspectives on maybe certain resources that are available that you did not have available. And I will say, to the extent that you can identify in your grant application, what resources that you can leverage to be able to implement your programs, I mean, that's really going to go a long way. But you also want your partners to be bought in, let them know what the value of this program could be for them. Maybe your program is going to be focused on reducing victimization. So, maybe the business community is going to appreciate that. And so, to the extent that you can go to these partners or different, community, businesses and leaders and talk about what you're doing and let them know why this program is, or let them know why this is important to them, it'll go a long way as far as getting buy-in from those folks. The tool will give you tips for developing partnerships. Communication is definitely important. Always make sure that you're clear on what your goals are for the program. Also, if it's a partnership that's going to work best with a memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding, then that should be clear as well. But you should really have a pitch when you go to your partners to really kind of talk about what work you're planning to do and how it's going to be beneficial to them in the community. Some of that may involve stories. If you have stories about successes in your programs, like let's say you had a healing and wellness court, you have someone who had some issues, but now they're successful in your program. Now they're reunited with the family. Now they have a job. They have a house. So like telling these stories, I think will go a long way. So to the extent that you can pull together anecdotal information on how the work that you've been doing has been successful, that will go a long way. Advisory board members, again, to the extent you can pull together an advisory board, that'll be helpful as well. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about needs assessments in the community profile. As part of your grant application, we do want to see a community profile, which kind of gives us a overall perspective on what your community is like, what your population is, what any type of data that you may have on your crime stats, all those types of things. That's really helpful in giving us a clear picture that you do have a need in your community. And so, in order to do that, in order to pull together cohesive community profile, it's going to be important to do a needs assessment. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So a needs assessment is really going to allow you to determine what gaps exist in your justice continuum. And so once you figure out those gaps, then you'll be able to that'll guide you to where you need to go as far as, what purpose areas that you're going to want to apply for, as well as, what outcomes that you're going to want to see, or what outcomes are going to be needed in order to achieve some success. So, looking at your current conditions, and then, that's really important, because basically what that allows you to do is to have a baseline. So if you go in this with a baseline, like you say, oh, wow, like it's out of all the, we're seeing 80% of our population are, folks that are getting out of the institutions, 80% are going back. Well, that's pretty high if you got 80% that's going back. So that gives you a baseline to build on. So maybe you'll say, well, we want to reduce that by a certain amount of percentage. As based on your needs assessment, you'll be able to find that information. Or if you're finding that, let's say you find out that as far as your jail population is concerned, that most of the folks that are going in there are for DUIs. They may only be in there for a day or so. There maybe a detox is something that you may want to consider, and instead of building a detention center, just because you're finding that your population is more DUIs or as opposed to folks that are committing violent crimes. So needs assessment will allow you to get at that, and then it's really going to be key to have your partners involved in that needs assessment as well, because they're going to have that data that you probably don't have at your fingertips, but that is going to be really paramount for you to be able to make the case, if you will, that you need funding to address your criminal justice needs. This tool is going to actually walk you through how to go about a needs assessment. It's going to talk about bringing together the key people. It's going to talk about identifying the data that you need for your application. You're going to get into how you use your data to describe why it's important to fund your program. Because I will say that when it makes it a stronger case for you when you have quantitative information that shows why there's a need, as opposed to, just telling us anecdotally that there is a need. I mean, it's having that data is not a requirement for getting funding, because we have funded applications that don't, but what really puts you in that higher fundable category, I should say, is when you do have the data to back up to substantiate your claim. As far as identifying the data that you need for the application, again, I was talking about some data you can get from the courts, you can get from law enforcement. Also, look at the census reports. That may help as well. Also look closely at past efforts and strategies, like what have you done that's worked, what hasn't worked, and why didn't it work. So you should be able to explain that in the application. Now, if you don't have data to support something, give an explanation as to why, maybe a sentence or two. If you're not responsive to all the questions, we're going to wonder, okay, so why didn't they respond? Is it because they don't have the information, or is it because they just overlooked it? So you don't want us going away with questions about why there were things missing in your application. Just be clear about why you may not have the information available, and then that will be helpful for the reviewers as well. Again, it's still talking about the needs assessment. More that you can, basically take what you've gathered as part of the assessment and use that to guide what you're requesting. The more strategic approach, and then the better that will be for you all as far as your application being successful. The needs assessment is very important for a number of reasons, and I'm not going to go through all these, but as you go through the tool, you'll be able to click on a helpful tips link, actually, that will also examples of a needs assessment. So you'll have these resources that you can go to really help you figure out how to understand the problem and kind of what has been done and how to assess the gaps and where you need to improve. And so definitely please use this information in the tool to your advantage. Again, it really helps us as federal reviewers to get a good overall picture, because the more we know about your jurisdictional needs, then as far as the peer reviewers are concerned, that will go far as how reviewers review your applications. Because the thing about it is we have objective criteria that we have our reviewers look at to score your application. But realistically, I mean, you don't want to frustrate folks because you're not clear about what your problems are. You're not providing support for your problems, and then so when you're frustrated, that goes with anyone, and that's going to kind of cloud your lens, if you will, of how your overall perspective of solicitation, so that of the application, and so that may come through. And so you don't want to do that. Like, you don't want to frustrate the reviewers. You don't want to cause them to look at your application in a negative way, only because they're not getting information that was requested as part of that solicitation. So the program design, that's really the most important, like I said, the most heavily weighted section of your solicitation. And so you're really going to want to make sure you're clear on what the requirements are around what needs to be included in that program or purpose area narrative, if you will. So when I say program design and purpose area narrative, I'm using those terms interchangeably, but that's where you really going to, so hopefully by the time you get to writing this piece, you have your partnerships in place, you've done your needs assessment already, you've met with your leadership to make them clear on what you want to achieve or what purpose areas you want to apply for. So now you're kind of, you got your vision, you got your mission statement. Now you're ready to start writing the solicitation or start writing these purpose area narratives. When you write the narratives, really kind of be clear on what you're trying to achieve. Make sure if you have goals, make sure you have goals and objectives, but make sure those goals and objectives are realistic. The last thing you want to do is set your program up for failure because you're providing goals and objectives that may not be achievable, or that you're just giving us this information because you think that's what we want to hear. These goals and objectives need to be based on your what research you've done, the needs assessment you've done. The example I'll give is, with the 80% recidivism rate, that you got 80% people that are coming out of jail that are going back in. Well, maybe you're not going to get it down to 0%, right? Like, optimally, it would be great to get it down by 0%, but realistically, maybe you'll be able to your goal is to get a 20 to 30% decrease in that number. That's just an example, but just make sure that you're clear on that. Make sure you're clear on who the target population is that you're going to be addressing. Basically, make sure your purpose area narrative addresses any requirements that were requested in the template, because when you go to the solicitation, it's going to refer you to a template for each purpose area. And so make sure you answer all those questions. And then, like I said, if you don't have the information, just be clear in why you don't have, say you don't have it, and have an explanation as to why you don't. And that way, we at least know that you tried to address that. If you really look at the solicitation, you also want to look at any statutory and legislative requirements associated with each purpose area, because if you just want to make sure that what you're applying for is consistent with that statutory information and requirements, because we're really sticklers for that. I mean, it tends to be that the statutory language and the legislative language is broad, and then I know some of some of the requirements that we put in there go a little bit above what's statutorily required sometimes, but that's more of a policy matter. But just make sure that you're clear on those requirements statutorily, as well as the non-statutory requirements that we have for each solicitation. Writing thoughtfully. Part of this is also you doing an abstract as part of your application. So the abstract is that's really kind of, it's more brief than the actual program design. It gives us a snapshot of what your project's purpose is, who's going to be served, and what activities you are planning to do in order to implement the goals and objectives of the program. So that abstract should be brief and to the point, because also what we do, but make sure it's clearly written, because what will happen is you will get requests from, maybe from Congress or from Department of Justice leadership as far as like what certain programs are going to be doing when they get funded. And if we can, a lot of times we'll just take that abstract information and provide that. So that's more of a that could be potentially a public-facing document that, that could be seen by folks that are external to DOJ even. So just make sure that's a really well-written piece. So there's a timeline that's also going to be part of the program narrative. So you want to make sure that, and this is kind of here's a sample of a timeline here. And I think when you go on the website, when you look at resources for the solicitation, it will provide the timeline, sample timeline as well. So it's just, take a look at that, because, that's really going to be important to show us that you're going to have the capacity to implement the program and complete it within the amount of time allotted for your program. So whether it's most of these programs are 36 months, but you want to make sure that you have that included. So I want to go to the budget, because I know that's really important. So this tool, again, is going to allow you to go to a section that's going to help you with the budget, with developing a budget for your program. The biggest things I can say about the budget is make sure all the costs that you are including are allowable costs under the programs that you're applying for. Make sure that that the budget and the program design, that they are consistent. Like, don't have a budget item in your budget, but on something that you don't talk about in your program narrative, because again, that's going to let reviewers know, or of your viewers are going to come away with, well, we don't really think this proposal is a prudent or a well thought out proposal because they have a budget item here that they don't talk about in the narrative. And so just kind of make sure that those two pieces coincide, and you'll have to do a budget summary, and that should clearly summarize kind of what you're proposing in the budget detail worksheet. And then just kind of again make sure that your budget detail worksheet is clear. Break out any items that you can break out, like as far as costs, like if you have costs for equipment, or you're making certain purchases for, or if you have personnel, you want to make sure it's clear about how many hours that they're going to be allocating, or what percentage of their time is going to be allocated to the program. Because if you do get funded, then if you have a well put together budget, if you have a budget that's kind of tightly, cohesively pulled or done, then you're more likely to get your budget approved faster if your grant gets approved. And if you have a lot of questions in your budget, it's going to take a long time to get through the budget office to get approved, because there's going to be a lot of questions there. So I mentioned with the budget before, what's allowable is important, what's reasonable. You make sure your budget's reasonable. I mean, if you're getting computer equipment, make sure you've done your research to determine what the estimate is going to be. I mean, you don't have to have exact costs, but make sure that it's reasonable, because that folks are going to look at that. And then make sure whatever you're proposing is allocable to the project. And so that's something where you want to make sure that that you're proposing things that are allowable for the program, and then you also have already mentioned that it's going to be consistent with what you're proposing in your program design. So the requirements as far as preparing your budget, you should start working early. You should have your financial person looking at any of the requirements in there, and the financial guide. That's the online, the Department of Justice financial guide, if you will. That'll be very helpful, just to make sure that your whatever you're proposing is consistent with what the Department of Justice's requirements are around grant funding. Common mistakes. Just wanted to highlight a couple things that we see. Sometimes we get applications when the budget detail worksheet is actually missing, that's the showstopper. Your application will not move forward without a budget. So just make sure that that's in place. Because what we find sometimes is what folks may do is, and it's unintentional, but they may find that they didn't include something, and then they'll submit another document as part of their application, and then they'll overwrite the budget detail worksheet or some other document. So just make sure you see that all your attachments are there, including the budget worksheet, when you go to submit your application. Sometimes what we see is there's unallowable costs in a budget. I just talked about that. That's a mistake. Break it out. You got to make sure that the required costs are broken out by category. Sometimes we see that the budget narrative is incomplete or unclear, and that if there's a federally approved indirect cost rate, make sure you submit that information. Make sure you know what that indirect cost rate is, because that's another thing that we see sometimes is missing. And also make sure you submit your accounting system and financial capability questionnaire form. That needs to be submitted as well. Make sure some of the things that you should try to make sure that if you have any audits that are outstanding, make sure all your audits are up to date, because if you get awarded, what happens is what'll happen is they'll look to see whether or not your audits are up to date. If not, that will delay you getting an award. Make sure you have the correct people listed as your points of contact, because the grant award is going to go to whoever the points of contact are in GMS, the grants management system. If that person is no longer there, then you're not going to get the notification that you need to get about the grant. So here's some links to look at as far as the financial guides that I just talked about. You can go to the OJP financial guide. I know there's the OVW, and the COPS has a financial guide as well. Again, more things to avoid when writing your grant. You don't want to just use jargon. and acronyms that people that are not explained or people don't understand. Again, that frustrates reviewers. Don't just look at the solicitation and copy it word for word. We'll see that. We'll see right through that. Also, as far as performance measurement plans or evaluation plans, make sure that you're clear on that. Another thing is what we see a lot is folks don't follow the proposal instructions. So make sure that you follow those instructions very well, and then make sure that you understand the grant programs. If you have it, don't leave things unanswered. I can't stress that enough. Make sure you review your application. Also have others review your application before you submit it. Having a different set of eyes can be helpful because you've been working on it so long that you become so intimately involved with it, then you may be subjective and may not be able to see certain things that other folks may be able to see. Real quick here, this is the website that I was talking to you about as far as where all the grant application information is. If you have any issues, questions, concerns, the response center is you want to contact the response center. That information is in your application, it's in the solicitation. There's a GMS helpline, so if you're having problems specific to the grants management system, that's the hotline that you'll want to connect with, and that their hours are listed here on the website. If we have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Julius. The first question is there a resource or location to access successfully completed and accepted CTAS grants to utilize as an example?
Yes, because if you go to our main page, our grant, you would go to the grants link, and then you would go to open solicitations. Scroll down to the very bottom, and it says past successful application packet. So it's under the miscellaneous documents for CTAS FY 2019, and you click on past successful application packet, and that'll give you previously successful application samples.
Great, thank you. Another question is the community assessment required or not?
Well, it's not required on our end, but it'll help applicant, basically provide a case or, substantiate their need for their funding requests. So it's not required on our end, but it's advisable that you would do it as part of your internal process as far as preparing the application solicitation.
Great, thank you. Another question is, we have a needs assessment that was completed in 2013. Is this data too old to be used for my CTAS application? At what point should we be looking at updating our needs assessment?
Well, it's always good to have an updated needs assessment, but even if it's 2013, I would still use that because having some data is better than none at all. So yeah, to the extent that because realistically, it's been about maybe 5 years, so things may not have changed that drastically. So you may still see things that are applicable there, but I would share that needs assessment with your partners as well to get their perspective as far as whether or not they think that is still applicable as well.
Great, thank you. We do have a comment, and that is there's an interest in training for use of the GMS proposal development and submission tool. Yeah, well,
okay. I could find out because I know we have GMS tools, but I would have to figure out if we have one for application processes. I know we have it for post award, but I would have to get back to you all on that one.
Thanks, Julius. Another question is there a list of unallowable budget items for purpose area number 10?
If you go to purpose area number 10, it tells you about what can be. I would look at what is allowable. But if you have any questions about whether or not something is allowable, I would advise you to reach out to the response center, and then the response center could contact the subject matter expert for that program, and then you could get more individualized information regarding whether or not something's allowable or not.
Great, thank you. Another question is, what is CJ?
Criminal justice.
Thank you. Another question is, in the past, we've been docked for not including the demographic form when applying for a purpose area other than number 1. However, the solicitation states that the form is only required for purpose area number 1. Can you confirm whether or not the demographic form is needed for other purpose areas?
Yes, I can confirm that it's not needed for other purpose areas. It's only needed for purpose area 1. But you know, if you get that comment, or if you've gotten that comment, then that's not accurate, unfortunately. So if you got dinged for that, but I mean, I know at one point it was required, but now, I mean, it's over the last couple of years, it hasn't been required. It has not been required for other purpose areas, and it's currently not required in FY19.
Great, thank you, Julius. Do all reviewers see the high-risk status document?
No, the reviewers don't see any of that information. All the reviewers see is the criteria and the application that we ask them to review, which would be the program, the narrative, program design, you know, the budget, but they would not see any of those administrative documents.
Great, thank you. We had reviewers' comments that included the high-risk status and asked why we did not address it.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, I'm just wondering if that was the peer reviewer that said that, or if it was maybe someone federal. But if it's a peer review comment, then that's something I would have to check on, because there's different high risk. There's a high risk that's basically, you know, it's if they're high risk from another agency outside of DOJ. And so, Christina, let me take a look at that, and then if you can make a note of that, then I'll get back to them with a response.
Great, and they did ask if they could send those to you to see them.
Okay, yes, that'd be great.
Okay.
You can. I'll give you my email address. It's Julius, it's Julius .Dupree, that's DUPREE, at USDOJ.gov. Again, that's Julius, Julius .Dupree, DUPREE, at USDOJ.gov.
Great, thank you, Julius. Another question is there a chance of funding results being released sooner than they currently are?
Historically, it's usually been around before, like, September 30th, before September 30th. I can't, unfortunately, give any more information as far as that. We will make sure that we make awards before September 30th, 2019. But unfortunately, I mean, we hope to try to get it out earlier, but I just can't give that information at this point.
Great, thanks, Julius. Is there a breakdown anywhere of how many grants were applied for and then given in each purpose area for the 2018 solicitation?
So 2018, we had a total of 197 applicants, I should say. Out of those applicants, we had 133 that were funded. We had 475 total applications. That's not broken out by purpose area, but out of that 475, we made 225 awards in FY18. So that's the extent of the data that I have. But again, I don't have it by purpose area, unfortunately.
Thank you, Julius. There was a comment that on the COPS website, there is a combined award funding list for 2018, and that is on the COPS office website. And Julius, do you have any additional comments or final comments that you would like to share?
No, not at this point. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess one thing I did want to say is that we are in the process of pulling together some in-person accessing grants to strengthen tribal capacity workshops. I know that there's one in Texas that's January 30th through the 31st that it's still pending conference approval, so we don't, we don't have a lot of information on those right now, but there's also going to be one in Anchorage, Alaska, and I think that was from February 4th through the 5th, I want to say. So these are just as to keep an eye out as far as notification on these, because what will happen is we'll try to get pretty soon. We want to get a notification out to the field, via the grants delivery or grants.gov listing, and also we'll be working with our partners to get that message out as well, and it'll be posted to this website, the Tribal Justice and Safety website, where we have all the training and webinars listed. So just kind of keep an eye out for that. So if you're interested in doing more in-person training around, grant writing, skills, then those workshops may be a potential option for you.
Great.
Now,
thanks,
we don't
Julius.
pay for. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
There was a question for clarification. Was that grants.gov or DOJ's GMS site for that announcement?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's going to be the Tribal Justice and Safety website. So if you go to it's where I mentioned, it would be www.justice.gov/training and technical assistance. So it would be posted there actually. Oh, I'm sorry. And also it'll be the training and there's a training and technical assistance training events on that same website. So it would be www.justice.gov/tribal/TTA-training events. But once you go to that tribaljusticeandsafety.gov website, then you'll see all those links that I'm referring to, and most likely it's going to be on the home page too. So as soon as you go to the tribaljusticeandsafety.gov website, it'll be top billing. It'll be at the very top, just because it's a new training opportunity. But we haven't gotten conference approval for that yet, so we really haven't done a lot of marketing around that. But I just want to give folks a heads up that is something that's going to be forthcoming. And just so you know, that grant funds cannot be used. Our DOJ grant funds cannot be used to fund travel to these events. So that's just one thing I wanted to make clear as well.
Great, thanks, Julius. We did receive a comment for clarification, and that is if for those looking for the awards by purpose area, if you go to the COPS website and review under the Review 2018 Grants-Awards section, the DOJ Combined Awards list is the name of the document that is listed on the COPS website, and you'll be able to see the 2018 CTAS awards across purpose areas.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Are there any final comments you'd like?
I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about this online tool, and hopefully, folks can at least explore that and use it to submit use it to inform their application process. So.
All right. Great. Well, we would like to thank everyone for joining us today, and we hope you can join us for future fiscal year 2019 CTAS webinars. Thank you for joining.